I actually signed him when I was at Clyde as a manager. He had been full time all his career, and he decided to drop down into part time level. And I've got to be honest with you, he was great for me. Really good boy, trained really well. And he just came to me just after the Christmas period, I think it was, that he was going to go and try something different. He wanted to get the chance of full time employment. I think it was to work with one of his family members, so he couldn't give his time to the football, so he went away and done that, and I left the door open for him because I didn't want to lose him, because he was a good player. Obviously he'd played at Falkirk, Bradford, Queen of the South, very good player, but I didn't want to stand in his way, because listen, it was an opportunity for him to earn a good salary, Rob. So he went away and obviously done that. We continued to play. We got into the playoff semi-final, and we get the sad news on the way back for Elgin when we had won the game to get into the playoff final against Queen's Park. We get the bad news broken to us on the way down on the bus, and it was devastating, because obviously I had worked with him only for a short period of time, but he became close to some of the boys. They were really friendly with him, and I just couldn't believe it that he took his own life. I didn't see it, if I'm being honest with you. And as times went on, you get to see people being more open and want to go and speak. And obviously Chris didn't feel that he could do that. So sad. It was a real sad time for us. And it affected the team, I'll be honest with you, as I said, because he was a very popular member of the dressing room. And I see what his family are doing with the Chris Mitchell Foundation, and I seen a bit on Sky yesterday actually with his dad and Scott Arfield. So it's a great thing they're doing, and hopefully if not just footballers, if anybody's struggling in life, they take the opportunity to go and speak to somebody.
Yeah, the Chris Mitchell Foundation is doing fantastic work, and there are so many therapy groups. We've spoken to lots of them on this show, John, but the more the better, because there's so much work to be done, because there are so many problems with mental health now in football, obviously everywhere, but in football as well.
There is, and I my heart goes out to Chris Mitchell, obviously, and his family, and I hope this charity thrives. I'm sure it will, and it's more about the awareness side of things, isn't it? Create awareness for mental health. That's what everybody's why people are doing this and doing things for charity, raising money, raising awareness. And I always go back to Gary Speed. Gary Speed just seemed like the man who had everything. He was handsome, he had looks of a film star, didn't he, Speedo? Loved his golf, magnificent footballer, had the perfect family, Eddie and Tommy, his two boys, his two sons. He worshipped his sons. I knew his dad, Roger, and his mum, Carol. I travelled the world with Gary, with the Welsh team, with the national team. And he was just a fantastic guy, just a man amongst men, one of the chaps. And then one morning I went in to do a game, and Bobby Gould put his arm around me. He said, "John," he said, "last night," he said, "Gary Speed took his own life." And I just sort of put my head in Bobby's shoulder, and I just couldn't come away from his shoulder. I was just so shocked. What, Gary? It's no way. Anybody else, it's a surprise, it's a shock, anybody else, but not Gary. He just seemed perfect. He had the perfect life. He was manager of his national country, Wales, doing a great job. And then he decides to take his own life in tragic circumstances, And Gary was so popular that anybody would have helped him. And Barry just alluded to them, if he'd have come to speak to anybody, people would have helped him. If he'd shared his issues, his problems, what's going on in his mind. He did Football Focus in the afternoon with Gary McAllister live on the BBC. Yeah. And it was that night that he did what he did so tragically. Wales is still in mourning over Gary Speed. People just cannot believe it. But you just don't know what's going on in between them years. And I think a problem shared is a problem solved. Yeah. If you know what I mean. You've got to talk. Anybody listening out there who's struggling mentally, you've got to tell someone. Tell a member of your family, tell your best friend. And there's practitioners, professional practitioners out there. There's professional therapists out there. There's an awful lot of help. Yeah. But people don't want to be seen to cry for help. Don't want to be seen to ask. And
I think maybe here in Scotland we're maybe the world's worst at opening up and talking about these sort of things.
When this happened, and obviously we get the news coming back down the bus, I actually started to question myself: was my door open? Was I not good enough to come and speak to you? Start thinking like that as well. And in time, I've seen it with another few players who have struggled, and it's
you'd a player at Celtic Hearts, didn't you? That was on the brink of doing
suicidal
something.
thoughts.
Yeah.
And I had to obviously speak with him, and if I can't help him, I can guide him in the right direction. And thankfully we did that, and he went away and he sought the help, and he got the advice, and he came through it down the end. He's not playing with us anymore, but he's went on and he's got on with his life. And that's the thing, as a manager, you've got to be able to, you've got to be approachable. As I said, if you can't help them, you can always try and guide them in the right directions. And in terms of Chris Mitchell, you didn't see it coming. I'll go back to it. He was a good looking guy as well. What John just says about Gary Speed there, and he was a
seemed
good
to have so
player.
much going for him.
Yep, and he had a girlfriend and nice car, and he was getting an opportunity to go and work in full-time employment, and you don't think anything else, and then a couple of months down the line he takes his own life, and it just, I seen how it affected, as I said, the team, because he was really close to 3 or 4 of the boys, and it's a great thing they're doing. As I said, Rob, I watched it a couple of times actually on Sky Sports with his dad at the Falkirk Stadium with Scott Arfield, and then there was another couple of people involved. A great thing, and hopefully if people have issues, they can go and use the Chris Mitchell Foundation. Yeah,
obviously there is Samaritans, and there are so many other good organisations and people you can talk to, and I think we like to think on this show, I mean, Aaron Connolly has been on the show a couple of times, and he set up the Time to Tackle group, the therapy group, very approachable, wants people to come and talk. I mean, he himself, Aaron, literally pulled himself back from the brink of taking his own life, and so I think we would encourage you on this show, if you want to come on, talk football. I mean, what a great way of cheering yourself up is talking about football.
It sure is, and in terms of, certainly at my level, in terms of where I'm managing, I've got players who are not getting out and getting that release of playing football, and I'm concerned for their mental health as well, Rob, because some of them have lost jobs and they've got families to try and provide for, and it's tough times for everybody, but hopefully at some stage we'll come out of this pandemic. But there's a lot of good. It's not just Chris Mitchell's foundation which are doing well. There's a lot of good people out there willing to give their help, and as long as you're willing to go and talk about it, because it's more open now, which I'm happy with. I think back in your time, me and John's era, you couldn't really talk about it. Now it's more open. Yeah, there's a lot more information now, and I get exactly what Barry is saying there about some lads playing for Celtic Hearts and missing their training, not earning a fortune, being furloughed and everything else, having problems. But this can also happen to a multi-millionaire. Somebody who's got money, somebody who's got the perfect family, somebody who drives a magnificent car. He could have the same problems. Yeah. This is not all about going in the dress and say, hey, you, come on, just, show a pair of BALLS's. That's not the way to go about it. That's the last thing you should say to anybody who's got a few problems, mentally with his health. So it can happen to anybody. It can happen to a banker, a solicitor, a lawyer, a footballer. There's rugby players that take their own lives, cricketers. It can happen to anybody. And the one thing, I have to get out there is that there's an awful lot of help now. There's so much more help now than there was 10, totally 15 years ago. Yeah. Because people are more aware of it now. Yeah.
The Go Radio Football Show.